If I could go back to that night, I'd walk away from the taxi. Because that's where I lost the woman who loved me most. My name is Nathan, I'm 34 years old, and I made the kind of mistake that changes you forever. Not the kind you can fix, not the kind you can explain away, the kind that haunts you, quietly, every single day. You know, people think betrayal happens in one moment. Like, you cross a line and that's it, but the truth is, it starts long before that, with silence. With small things you stop saying, with glances that last too long. With love that fades, not explodes. That's how it started for me and Anna. Anna and I met when we were both 26. It was at a friend's engagement party. I wasn't planning to go. I'd had a long week, I was tired. But my buddy insisted, and so I showed up late, still in my office clothes. And then I saw her. She was standing near the bar, laughing with someone. That laugh, I still remember it. It wasn't loud, just effortless. She looked over and our eyes met for a second, and I swear everything around us just blurred. We talked for hours that night. I don't even remember what about, probably nothing important. But it felt like we'd known each other for years. By the time the party ended, I didn't want to leave. Neither did she. A week later, we went out for coffee, then dinner, then weekends together. 6 months later, she moved into my apartment. We were happy, truly happy. We cooked together, planned trips, stayed up late talking about the future. We were broke, but it didn't matter. We had each other, and that was enough. When I proposed, she cried. We got married in a small garden, surrounded by family and a few close friends. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my life. My forever. For the first few years, it really was perfect. We both worked hard. She was a designer, always sketching, always covered in bits of paper and paint. I worked in marketing. We weren't rich, but we were building something. But over time, life started getting heavier. Bills, deadlines, exhaustion. All those small things that slowly steal your warmth. Anna started freelancing from home, and I got promoted, which meant late nights and constant stress. We began living parallel lives. Same house, different worlds. At first, it was small things. She'd fall asleep before I got home. I'd leave before she woke up. We'd argue about stupid stuff, dishes, groceries, who forgot to pay the bill. But underneath all that was something deeper. We were losing each other. I remember one night, I came home around midnight. The lights were off except one, a small lamp by the window. She was sitting there, staring at the street. I said, "Hey, you're still up." She didn't turn around. She just said, "Do you ever feel like you're living with a stranger?" It hit me hard. But instead of talking, I just said, "You're tired. Go to sleep." That's the moment I started pretending everything was fine. A few months later, our company brought in a PR consultant, Emily. She was different. Outgoing, confident, the kind of person who made every room brighter. She teased me, challenged my ideas, laughed at my bad jokes. She made me feel interesting again. At first, I didn't think much of it. We just got along. But over time, our conversations started to drift from work to life, music, dreams, regrets. And then one night, after a company event, it rained hard. We shared a cab. She looked at me and said, "You look like someone who's carrying too much." That line broke me. I told her about Anna, how we'd grown distant, how I felt invisible, how I didn't know what to do anymore. She listened. She didn't try to fix it, just listened. And when the taxi stopped, I didn't go home. It's strange, I didn't plan it. It just happened. And once it did, I couldn't undo it. The guilt was instant. Every time Anna smiled at me, it felt like a knife. But the thing about guilt is, it doesn't stop you. It just eats you slower. For weeks, I lived two lives. At home, pretending everything was normal. At work, sneaking glances and stolen moments with Emily. It was exhausting. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating right. I was living in constant fear of losing both of them. One night, I came home, and Anna was waiting. There was an envelope on the table. My phone was inside. She said quietly, "I read your messages." My world fell apart. I tried to explain, to apologize, but she just said, "If you want to go, go. But don't make me beg you to be honest." And so, I left. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that it was better to be honest now than to keep lying. But deep down, I knew I was just running away. Emily and I moved in together. At first, it was exciting, new beginnings, no secrets. But the truth followed me there. Emily wanted a future, marriage, kids, plans. And I couldn't give her that, not after what I'd done. I was broken. Every time she touched me, I saw Anna. Every time I laughed, I felt guilt. Emily began to sense it. One night she said, "You're not here, Nathan. You're somewhere else." I didn't answer. Because she was right. A week later she left. No fights, no tears, just silence. For a year I lived alone. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I started therapy. I wanted to understand why I kept destroying things that were good. My therapist told me something I'll never forget. You didn't cheat because you stopped loving Anna. You cheated because you stopped loving yourself. That line stayed with me. Time passed. I got better, or at least quieter. Then one afternoon I saw Anna again. It was at a cafe near my office. She was sitting with a man, tall, kind-looking, laughing softly. For a moment it felt like time froze. She looked different, lighter, free. She noticed me too. Our eyes met. She smiled, a small, tired smile, and gave me a nod. Then she turned back to him. That smile, it wasn't anger or forgiveness. It was peace. Like she'd finally let go of everything, including me. That night, I came home and sat by the window, just like she used to. The city lights looked the same, but I wasn't. For the first time, I understood what she meant that night, living with a stranger. The stranger was me. Months later, I got a letter. No return address. Inside, there was a wedding invitation. Anna's name. A date. Nothing else. I didn't go. I didn't even know if I was supposed to. But I kept that card. Still have it. 3 years later, I ran into Emily at the airport. She looked good, confident, happy. We talked for a bit. She was engaged, moving to another city. Before she left, she said, "You know, I don't regret what happened. But I hope you finally learned to stay." I didn't know what to say. She smiled and walked away. That night, on the flight home, I opened my old notes on my phone, drafts I'd written but never sent. There was one message for Anna. It said, "I'm sorry. Not for what I did, but for what I became." I never sent it. Now, years later, I live quietly. I still wear my wedding ring, even though there's no one to ask why. Sometimes I go to that same cafe, sit near the window, and just watch couples laughing, fighting, making up. And I think about how love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about being brave enough to tell the truth before it's too late, because the things we hide, they always find their way out. And when they do, they don't just destroy others. They destroy us.
My name is Lena, I'm 32, and this is the story of the day I almost got married, in the 3 years that followed when I found out the truth. You know how people say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life? Mine never happened. It's strange. I had everything planned down to the smallest detail. The white dress, the flowers, the playlist, the guests. Even the little notes I'd leave on every table with quotes about love. And the man I thought I was going to spend forever with, Mark, was the center of it all. We met 5 years ago at a bookstore. I was standing in line holding a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, and the guy in front of me turned around and said, "Good choice, but it won't change your life." That was Mark. We laughed, talked for a few minutes, and somehow he convinced me to get coffee with him. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into weekends together, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Mark was everything I thought I needed: kind, funny, calm. He made me feel safe. After years of heartbreaks and disappointments, I finally believed in love again. When he proposed, it was simple. No fireworks, no crowd, just the two of us on a rainy afternoon. He looked nervous and said, "I don't have a speech. I just know I don't want to wake up another day without you." I said, "Yes, of course I did." The next year was full of planning, venues, guests, decorations. We fought about small things, but that's normal, right? At least, that's what I thought. Then came the night before the wedding. Everything was ready. The dress hung on the door, the rings were in their box, and my friends were with me in the hotel suite, drinking champagne, laughing, trying to calm my nerves. I remember texting Mark, "Can't believe tomorrow's the day." He replied, "I can't wait." That was the last message I ever got from him. The next morning, I woke up early, too excited to sleep. The hairstylist came, the makeup artist came, photographers were everywhere. Everyone was smiling. But Mark didn't show up. At first, we thought maybe traffic. Maybe he was running late. Then his best man couldn't reach him. His phone went straight to voicemail. An hour passed, then 2, then 4. I stood there in my wedding dress, surrounded by flowers and guests whispering in the background, waiting for someone to tell me this was all a mistake. But he never came. His parents were there, embarrassed and pale. They kept saying they didn't know where he was. And that's when I realized something was very, very wrong. We called the police. They searched his apartment. Everything was in place. His phone was gone. His car was missing. No note, no explanation, nothing. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I thought maybe he'd been kidnapped, maybe something terrible had happened. Then came the doubts. Maybe he'd run away. But why? We were happy, weren't we? Days turned into months. People moved on. But I didn't. Every day, I woke up hoping I'd get a message, a sign, anything. Every night, I replayed every conversation we ever had, looking for clues I'd missed. After 6 months, the police closed the case. No evidence of foul play. Mark was just gone. My friends told me to let go, to move on. But how do you move on when you don't even know what happened? 3 years passed. I changed cities, got a new job, new friends. I even started dating again, but nothing ever felt real. How could it, when half of me was still stuck in that moment, waiting at the altar for someone who never came? Then one rainy afternoon, everything changed. I was walking home from work, tired, umbrella barely holding against the wind. I ducked into a small cafe to wait out the rain. I ordered coffee, looked around, and froze. In the corner by the window sat Mark. He looked older, maybe thinner, but it was him. Same smile, same voice. And sitting across from him, a woman with a little boy. The boy was maybe 2, maybe 3. He had Mark's eyes. My hands started shaking. I didn't move. I just watched as he laughed, helped the kid with his cocoa, kissed the woman's hand. It felt like my whole world shattered all over again. I left before he could see me, but my heart wouldn't let me rest. I needed answers. That night, I found myself sitting in my car outside that cafe, waiting. When they finally came out, I followed them. They walked a few blocks, stopped at an apartment building. The woman carried the boy upstairs. Mark stayed outside for a moment, looked around, and I swear, for a second, he looked right at me. I drove away before he could be sure. For the next few days, I couldn't think about anything else. I searched online, found his name. Nothing. No social media, no traces. It was like he'd erased himself. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to that building and waited. When he came out, I walked straight up to him. He froze. "Lena?" he whispered. All the anger I'd buried for 3 years just exploded. "Where were you, Mark? You disappeared on our wedding day. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" He looked terrified. Not guilty, scared. "Please," he said. "Not here." We went to a nearby park, sat on a bench. I could barely breathe. He said, "I never meant to leave you. I was forced to." I laughed. Forced? By who? And then he told me something I'll never forget. Apparently, his father had been involved in some serious financial fraud, shady investments, fake accounts, all of it. And just days before our wedding, everything collapsed. The police were investigating, and his family was at risk. His father begged him to disappear, to protect them, because if he married me, I'd get dragged into the scandal. Mark said he tried to contact me, but his father destroyed his phone and moved him to another city that same night. He told me he couldn't even tell his mother where he was. I didn't know what to believe. It sounded insane, like a bad movie. But looking into his eyes, I saw something real. Guilt. Pain. Then I asked, "And her? The woman, the child?" He went quiet, then said, "That's Emma. She helped me when I had nothing. The boy's mine." I just sat there, numb. 3 years ago, I was supposed to marry him. Now he had a family. He said, I never stopped thinking about you, Lena, but I couldn't come back. I didn't want to ruin your life, too. I asked, then why now? Why did you let me see you? He smiled sadly. Maybe part of me wanted you to know I didn't just walk away. I stood up. I couldn't look at him anymore. I said, you didn't walk away, Mark. You disappeared. And there's a difference. Then I left. That night, I cried harder than I ever had before. Not because I still loved him, but because I finally understood that sometimes closure doesn't come with peace. 2 months later, I got a letter. It was from Mark. He wrote, I know I can't undo what I did, but I hope one day you'll remember me as someone who tried, not someone who ran. There was no return address. I never replied. Now, years later, I sometimes walk past that same cafe. Sometimes I see a little boy who looks like him running around, laughing. I smile. Not with anger, not with pain, just quiet acceptance. Because the truth is, life doesn't always give you the ending you expected. Sometimes it gives you the one you needed to finally let go.
My name is Daniel. I'm 31. And this story still gives me chills, not because it's supernatural, but because it made me question everything I thought I knew about memory, time, and fate. It started a year ago when I decided to move out of the city. I'd just gone through a breakup, lost my job, and was tired of everything, the noise, the people, the endless gray of my life. So I found this small town on the coast. Quiet, green, peaceful. The kind of place where nothing ever happens. I rented an old house at the edge of town. It wasn't perfect. Cracked paint, creaky floors, windows that howled when it rained, but there was something comforting about it. Like it had stories to tell. The first night, I remember walking through the rooms, touching the walls, smelling the wood. It felt familiar, which made no sense. I'd never been there before. But the weirdest part? When I went upstairs into the last room at the end of the hall, I suddenly froze. There was a small desk under the window, and on it, an old photo frame turned face down. I picked it up. Inside was a photo of a young woman standing in front of that exact same window, same curtains, same desk, same wallpaper. And beside her, half cropped out of the frame, was a man who looked exactly like me. I remember laughing nervously. Maybe a coincidence, similar face, lighting, angle. But the resemblance was impossible to ignore. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that photo. Who were they? What happened to them? Why was it left there? The next morning I went to ask the landlord, an old lady named Mrs. Graham, who lived 2 houses down. When she opened the door and saw me, she froze. Her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. I asked, Ma'am, do you know who used to live in my house? She hesitated, then said, It's been empty for years. Since the accident. I asked, What accident? She shook her head and said, You should probably let that old place rest. Then she closed the door. The word accident stayed in my head all day. That evening, I went up to the attic, hoping to find something. Anything. The air was thick with dust, the floor covered in old boxes. Inside one of them, I found letters, dozens of them, tied with a red ribbon. The first one was dated 1979. It started with, My dearest Daniel, I still hear you in every corner of this house. I froze. My name. The rest of the letter sounded like a love note, emotional, poetic, written by someone deeply in love. But it was clear the Daniel she was writing to was gone. Every letter was signed, Yours forever, Margaret. I spent the entire night reading them. From what I could piece together, Daniel and Margaret lived there together decades ago. He was a writer, she was a teacher. They were deeply in love until something happened. In one of the last letters, Margaret wrote, You said you'd be back before the storm. You never came home. They said it was an accident, but I don't believe them. I felt cold all over. I looked again at that old photo. The woman, the man who looked like me, Margaret, Daniel. Same house, same window. That night the wind was strong. Rain hitting the windows, thunder rolling in the distance. Around midnight I heard something, faint footsteps upstairs. I told myself it was the house settling. But then I heard a whisper. It was so soft I thought I imagined it. Daniel. I froze. I went upstairs, every instinct screaming not to, but I did it anyway. The light flickered, the air felt heavy. The door to that room, the one from the photo, was open. Inside, everything looked the same. Except now, on the desk, the photo frame was upright and the glass was cracked. I stepped closer and noticed something new. There was writing on the back of the photo. It said, "Find me by the shore. You promised." I stood there for a long time staring. My heart was racing, but something in me, a strange pull, told me I had to go. The next morning, I walked to the shore behind the house. The tide was low, the air cold and quiet. After a few minutes, I noticed something buried in the sand, a small metal box, rusted and old. Inside were two things, a gold ring and a pocket watch engraved with the initials DW, my initials. But here's the thing, I hadn't told anyone my middle name. It's William. I stood there, holding that watch, staring at my reflection in the metal, and for the first time in my life, I didn't recognize the person looking back. I went back to Mrs. Graham, showed her the watch. Her hands started shaking. She whispered, "That belonged to him. To Daniel White. He lived there with Margaret. They said he drowned in the storm. His body was never found." I asked when that happened. She said, 44 years ago. I didn't say anything. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept hearing the wind, the sea, the faint echo of my own name in the distance. A few days later, I decided to leave. I'd packed my things, locked the door, and dropped the keys with Mrs. Graham. As I was about to drive away, she called out, "Wait, there's something I never told you." I turned. She said, "When you moved in, I thought I was seeing a ghost. You look exactly like him. The same eyes, the same walk, the same voice." I didn't know what to say. I left town that day. But a week later, I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a piece of paper, yellowed, old, with one sentence written in elegant handwriting. "You found me. Now I can rest." I don't know who sent it, or how, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear the waves. And I wonder, maybe some places don't just remember people? Maybe they remember love that never ended.